Hey, Jesse here. Thanks for stopping by in my first video with many more to come, okay? Today's topic, we're going to be talking about renting versus buying. Now, I get it, there's a lot to go over, but by simply clicking on the video, you're already so much farther ahead than many others, my friend, okay? Now, we're not going to be left with a bunch of homework. We're not going to be left with long equations you have to figure out. We're basically going to make this as easy as possible so you can make the most informed decision, okay? Now, let's go over this animated video to get the basic questions out of the way, and we'll break it down afterwards, okay? Thanks.
Trying to figure out if you should rent or buy? There are many advantages and disadvantages to both renting and buying, depending on your life situation, financial status, and tolerance level. Advantage of buying: the house will be all yours once you pay off the mortgage. You'll have the option to rent the house out should you decide to move. Advantages of renting: you're free from the hassle of maintenance problems. You can easily move. Take a bird's eye view of your situation. Why are you moving? What costs are involved? Is this temporary or long-term? How much can you afford? Length of time you'll stay in a house should dramatically impact your decision. For example, if you plan on living in the house for 2 to 7 years, then it makes financial sense to buy. Please subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified when our next video goes live.
Okay, so you watch the clip and you got an understanding of the questions you should be asking, the pros of each, but at the end of the day, time plays a major factor in making the decision to rent versus buy, okay? Now, we could break it down by the 5% rule, give you a bunch of equations, and try to figure out a more specific situation to your own, but we're going to make this even easier. All we're going to need is our desired home price with our desired rental income, and we're going to take these and put these in a calculator that's going to compare them for us and do all the analytics for us, which I don't know of any other easier way to do so than that, and it'd be more specific to you and your situation than me just trying to explain things to you, okay? Now, what you're going to want to do is make sure that your desired home price, $300,000, is closely comparable to the rental market in your area. For example, in my area, $300,000 would translate over to $2,100, $2,200 worth of rental income, okay? So now that we have that data, we're gonna go over to the calculator, which we'll pull up on screen here, and we'll figure it out from there. So we're in the calculator now, and the link for this will be in the description below, but you're gonna see very quickly what I meant about making this very easy and very specific to your situation, okay? I asked for a desired home price and a desired rent per month, okay? Now, you want to make these comparable, like I said earlier, and what that means is that if I bought a home for $300,000, what would it rent for? Okay, now these numbers are very specific to my area, so you'll want to make sure that they are, and you could find that information out just by simply going to Craigslist and finding a place that's renting and a very comparable property for sale, okay? Now, you're going to want to drop down the advanced button and go over such things as the down payment, because depending on what loan program you're going with, it may be different. Your interest rate may be different depending on the time you're watching this video. You might live in New York and it could be a completely different tax rate. You may not want to do your own maintenance, and so this cost may be higher for you. And I mean, so on. You're going to want to input this information and make sure it's more specific to you, okay? Now, we're going to get a very quick rundown of when buying becomes cheaper in this graph, okay? And for this situation, just after 2 years, it does so become cheaper to buy than rent. And later in the video, you're going to see where I talk about what financial burden you're going to be taking on if you're renting 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And so just remember this for later in the video. Now, if you scroll farther down, you'll get an even more in-depth analytical review of the situation and the numbers you put in above. So hopefully this makes this really easy for you. Now let's go back to the board and finish up. All right, so we run our numbers through the calculator, and it's a really cool tool to help you just basically input numbers specific to your situation. Now for ours, we pulled the numbers and put them on the board up here. We're gonna break down the initial costs of renting versus buying, okay? For buying, you're in a situation where you're gonna have to put a down payment down. Depending on what type of loan you go with, you are gonna have a down payment and closing costs, okay? For renting, you're gonna be in a situation where you only have to put down the first month's rent plus security deposit. So initially, buying is way more expensive than renting. So if you're in a situation where you know that you want to move within the next year to 2 years, then renting might be the best decision for you. All right, so after looking at the initial cost of renting versus buying, when does it become more financially responsible to buy versus rent, okay? Now, the calculator showed us a little bit after 2 years, we started to save money buying versus renting, okay? So we're gonna create a scenario where we're gonna sell or move after 3 years. All right, so with the data that the calculator gave us, we created a scenario where after 3 years, you're either going to be moving or selling, okay? Now remember, at the end of the 3 years, your rent has increased 2% every year. So now you're sitting at $2,237 a month in rent versus the original $2,150 that you first got in for it at, okay? Now, on a fixed rate mortgage, aside from maybe property taxes, insurance, or HOA dues, if you have those, you're going to be relatively close to the same payment, okay? But for the sake of this argument, we're only going to be doing a situation after 3 years. But you could see how eventually, not just this 3-year mark, but the 4-year mark, 5-year mark, 6-year mark, how renting just becomes that much more expensive, and your payment is going to keep going up unless you own the property. So that's one of the biggest pros, and why it's so important on making sure that you know how long you're going to be in a property. So you're not in a situation where your rent's just constantly going up 2% every year. So let's go over what you're left with after you move out of your rental or close on the sale of your property, okay? Let's assume in an ideal world you get your full security deposit back, and for the last 3 years you've been in a situation where you had peace of mind that you were free from maintenance, and if anything come up, you weren't tied down to a property and you can move pretty much with relative ease, okay? But let's go over what that peace of mind cost you, okay? In this scenario, we bought a home for $300,000. Now we're going to assume, just like the rent increasing, that our home appreciated 2% every year. So our $300,000 home appreciated 2% every year for 3 years and is now worth $318,000. Okay. With the data we got from a calculator, we know that we owe $273,000 left on the mortgage, and we're gonna have about $19,000 left in closing costs. Those two numbers added together are $292,000. Okay, so we're gonna take our appreciated home value minus that $292K, and we're gonna be left with $26,000. $26,000 of your money. Now that's not counting for any repairs or anything that come up during the transaction, but let's just assume in an ideal world like the security deposit that you get that full amount, okay? $26,000 is far more enticing than just your security deposit. Hopefully with the tools and information I've given you now, you can make a more informed decision, more specific to your situation, and I sincerely hope that it helps you make the best financial decision for yourself in the long run, okay? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.